there's a rumor currently doing the rounds on Twitter, and I am personally treating it as a rumor for now because I haven't seen confirmation for myself. Maybe there's confirmation out there, but I haven't personally seen it, so I'm treating it as a rumor for now. But the rumor is Eddie Hearn has said that Joshua Buatsi is ready to fight Anthony Yarde right now. Now, Buatsi is 6-0 with 4 KOs. He turned pro last year in July. Yarde is 15-0 with 14 KOs. He turned pro in May 2015. So Yarde has a lot more professional fights than Joshua Buatsi, but Buatsi had a lot more amateur fights. Anthony Yarde has been as far as 7 rounds, which was in his last fight. Joshua Buatsi has never been 7 rounds in his life. The longest he's been is 5 and 6 rounds before. So, given the disparity between them in experience when it comes to professional fights, and leverage that against the disparity in experience between them in amateur fights, I don't think it's unreasonable for Eddie Hearn, if he was to do so, to offer Team Yarde the Joshua Buatsi fight. I don't think that would be an unreasonable thing for Eddie Hearn to do. And I'll be interested to see what the reaction of Tunde Ajayi, Anthony Yarde's manager and trainer, would be if they're offered the Buatsi fight. And also the response of Frank Warren, the promoter of Anthony Yarde. Now, I have to say this. I think Anthony Yarde is the most precocious talent I've seen for many, many years. With such little amateur experience, for him to pick up the game of boxing as late as he did and to become as advanced as he has is extremely impressive to me. To be able to do that in such a short space of time. Very impressed. I think he's got tremendous speed, tremendous punching power. He's physically strong. He's smooth. He picks his punches well. He has a very good punch variety. He can put his punches together in combination very well when he wants to. I'm very, very impressed with the natural talent and ability of Anthony Yarde, and I'm impressed with the technique that Tunde Ajayi has taught him so far. I'm impressed. But at the same time, as a boxing fan, I'm a little curious as to why Anthony Yarde is being moved as slowly as he's being moved. I understand he didn't have many amateur fights, but there are plenty of other fighters out there who also didn't have many amateur fights, but they're not being moved quite as slowly as Anthony Yarde. A good example would be one of Anthony Yarde's friends, who's also a professional boxer, O'Hara Davis. O'Hara Davis did not have a ton of amateur fights, but yet he is being matched much tougher than Anthony Yarde is being matched. He's taken on much better opposition than Anthony Yarde has fought so far. And Tunde might argue that, well, he's been moved too quickly because he lost to Josh Taylor. I don't necessarily think a loss is such a bad thing. Many fighters talk about how they learned more from certain losses than they did from all their wins. So it remains to be seen whether the Josh Taylor loss was a good thing or a bad thing for O'Hara Davis. Some fighters need a loss in order to grow. They need a loss in order to show themselves where they're really at in their development. And I know today it's all about maintaining an unbeaten record and having your O and all that kind of business. But there's no substitute for experience. So you can have the prettiest record in the world, but once you take a step up, if you haven't been in the fire, if you haven't been in crisis situations, when you eventually encounter them on your first step up, if it happens then, you could find yourself overwhelmed by the occasion, overwhelmed mentally and emotionally. But if you've been through it before, it's often not quite so difficult to cope second time around or third time around. You see? So this loss may not look good on paper, but the experience that O'Hara Davies may have gained from this loss could actually serve him very well in the future and could actually make him a better fighter. But let me not get too sidetracked on that. The point I'm making is O'Hara Davies has had a similar number of amateur fights, as far as I'm aware, to Anthony Yarde, but he's fighting much better opposition. And not only is he fighting much better opposition, but he's actually calling out his domestic rivals. And he's willing to fight his domestic rivals. He already fought one of them in Josh Taylor. He fought another one in Tom Farrell. He's going to fight another one in Josh Lever. Okay? Anthony Yarde, on the other hand, he did call out Jose Burton, to his credit, but he was called out by two other domestic rivals. Oh, sorry, he called out Frank Buglioni, not Jose Burton. I correct myself, okay? He called out Frank Buglioni, to his credit, but he was also called out by Jose Burton and more recently Callum Johnson. And his team, right, his manager and trainer, Tunde Ajayi, is not interested in those fights, apparently. I'm wondering why. They're only domestic level fighters. So what's the problem with Yarde fighting them? I know they've probably had more amateur experience than Anthony Yarde. I'm sure they have. But Yarde, when I look at him, is so talented. It makes me wonder what Tunde Ajayi is hiding with Anthony Yarde. Is there a chin issue? Is there a stamina issue? Is there a heart issue? I don't know. I'm not an Anthony Yarde hater. I'm very impressed by his ability. I'm just curious to find out what Tunde Ajayi is so concerned about. Why he's moving him so slowly. Now, I got into a conversation with someone on social media recently who said they used to train with Tunde Ajayi, and they said that his philosophy when it comes to managing fighters is similar to the Mexican philosophy, all right? Any of you who don't know, in Mexico, fighters tend to have relatively few amateur fights, okay? Short amateur careers. Turn professional very young. Sometimes Mexicans turn pro 15, 16, 17. I mean, very young. And then what they do is learn on the job as professionals, and they have a massive amount of fights early on in their professional careers against really low-level opposition just to hone their technique, gain confidence, etc. And, you know, this is the way Canelo Alvarez was built, for example. This is the way great Mexican fighters of the past, like Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., was built, for example. This is the Mexican way. This is how most Mexican fighters are built. So this individual was telling me that apparently this is also Tunde Ajayi's philosophy when it comes to building a fighter, is to kind of do it the Mexican way. Try and take the guy out of the amateurs before he's been in the amateurs too long, because they can pick up amateur habits, get them into the pros, build them slowly, rather than trying to rush them. Okay? Again, that's understood. I get it. I take that philosophy on board. Maybe that is the best way to build Anthony Yarde. But again, as somebody who is impressed by his talent, I just want to see what his talent can do against a live opponent. And I've seen recent interviews with Tunde Ajayi where he's been defending the quality of opposition that Anthony Yarde has fought. And he's been saying that people like Callum Johnson and Jose Burton have not fought opposition, you know, Frank Buglioni aside, they have not fought opposition that's any better than what Anthony Yarde's been fighting. And that may be true, but Tunde respectfully is missing the point, because what Anthony Yarde is most criticized for is not just the fact he hasn't faced quality opposition, because neither have Burton or Callum Johnson for the most part. It's the fact that he had the opportunity to fight quality opposition in his two domestic rivals, but he turned it down. That is what people are most critical about. You know, some guys are not fighting quality opposition and it's through no fault of their own because the quality guys won't fight them. Yeah? But Anthony Yarde is not in that position. He has quality guys at domestic level who are willing to fight him. But he or, Tunde Ajayi, his manager, was not willing to make those fights happen. That is what the majority of criticism that Anthony Yarde is receiving is for. All right? So, with all that being said, the Buatsi Yarde fight, as a boxing fan, I hope it happens sooner rather than later. And I hope that this rumor that Hearn is willing to put Buatsi in with Yarde right now is true. And I hope that Tunde Ajayi believes that Anthony Yarde is ready for Joshua Buatsi right now, and therefore makes the fight happen if an offer comes in. Yeah? I hope, because I'm a boxing fan. I want to be entertained. And I don't think it's an unreasonable proposal. The Yarde Beterbiev fight, no. Anthony Yarde should not be fighting Yarde Beterbiev. He has done nothing in his career so far to prepare him for someone like a Beterbiev. Like I mentioned earlier with Ohara Davis, Davis might have taken a loss against Taylor, but that experience was valuable that he picked up. And the other fights he's been in. Anthony Yarde hasn't fought anyone or had any experience that could remotely prepare him for something like a Beterbiev. So turning down Beterbiev, as far as I'm concerned, that's perfectly acceptable. Can't blame him. He hasn't been through enough yet as a professional to prepare him for that. It would be insane, actually, to put him in with Beterbiev now. But a Joshua Buatsi, this is a guy who hasn't had as many fights as a Callum Johnson or Jose Burton. So if they turn this down, I really have to start wondering why Yarde is being moved this carefully. What are they hiding? Yeah, I'm not trying to be horrible, I'm not trying to hate. I'm just a fan of boxing and someone who rates Anthony Yarde's natural ability and is impressed by Yarde's natural ability. I want to see what that ability can actually do in a real fight. And with the greatest of respect to Tunde Ajayi, you look at the opponents. Sejloka is a super middleweight. Avalanche, didn't he lose to Sejloka? Okay. All the other guys on Anthony Yarde's record are not a who's who of the light heavyweight division, but a who's he. Has anyone ever heard of Baranyi before or since Anthony Yarde fought him? I hadn't. Chris Hobbs, to be fair, I had heard of, but Chris Hobbs is Chris Hobbs. All these guys down here, Darren Snow, you've never heard of them. The two guys you have heard of, Avalanche and Sejloka, these are not guys who are big or strong enough. And they're not even in their primes. All right? Sejloka was at a decent level, super middleweight, European kind of level, I guess at one time. But he's stepping up to light heavyweight against a huge light heavyweight in Anthony Yarde. Yarde was able to stop him. Okay, well, he's supposed to. He's supposed to. With all due respect. Same with Avalanche. And he did what he had to do in those fights. I thought he boxed well in both fights. I was impressed with what he did. But you're not going to hoodwink me into thinking that these are two good level opponents for a light heavyweight who is 15-0. Yeah. And just finally, talking about weight, I've seen some people say that Joshua Buatsi should fight at super middleweight. Now, he was a light heavyweight in the amateurs, and it's typical for a lot of professionals to drop down a weight class or two when they turn pro, because in the professional game, they have the luxury of weighing in over 24 hours before the actual fight. This allows them to dehydrate themselves, make an unnaturally low weight, and then rehydrate before the first bell. You know, they've got plenty of time, over 24 hours usually, before the first bell from when they weigh in. So it wouldn't have been strange for Buatsi to drop down to super middleweight. But people saying Buatsi is small, I think are a little uninformed, personally, because you look at Buatsi's weights for what he's weighed in at so far in his professional career. He hasn't actually weighed 175 pounds yet. On his pro debut, he was half a pound over. For his last couple fights, he's weighed over 178 pounds. You look at Anthony Yarde, who is definitely a huge light heavyweight. Now, he did weigh as high as 188, which is massive, okay? But several fights here, he's weighed a similar amount to Joshua Buatsi. So he probably is bigger than Buatsi. In fact, I'm sure he is in terms of body mass. But Buatsi is not as small as some people believe. And I've seen some people claim Buatsi is 5'10". I've seen Joshua Buatsi in real life. Right? I've actually seen him in real life. I stood next to him. He is definitely at least 6 feet tall, probably around 6'1". Yeah, there is no way Joshua Buatsi's 5'10". He's at least 6 foot or over. So he's a good size light heavyweight. He's not the biggest guy out there, you know, not as big as Anthony Yarde, but he's a decent sized light heavyweight, I believe, and he'll grow into the weight as he gets older. So I don't think there's any need for him to fight at super middleweight. You know, unless he was really small, I don't see any need. I mean, well, let me contradict myself a little bit. In terms of his physical size, I don't think there's any need for him to be super middleweight. But in terms of the opposition, it might be more prudent for him to fight at super middleweight if he can make it comfortably. Because the opposition at light heavyweight is way, way, way tougher right now than the opposition is at super middleweight. At super middleweight, you got good fighters, but, you know, not that many beasts. Benavidez is a good fighter. Is he a beast? I wouldn't say so. James DeGale is a good fighter, but he's been looking ropey. George Groves is a good fighter. Who else is out there? Who am I missing? I mean, you got Eubank Jr., you know, but basically you get the point I'm making. The super middleweight division is okay, but it's not stacked with beasts and dangerous fighters. Whereas the light heavyweight division is. You've got Vodsek, you've got Beterbiev, you've got Kovalev, you've got Badu Jack, you've got Stevenson, although Stevenson's on his way out. Point is, it's a very, you've got Bivol. How could I forget to mention him? It's a very, very tough, very stacked division where virtually all of the top guys are huge punchers and they're all skilled. So I guess when people are saying, could Buatsi make super middleweight? Maybe they've got that on their mind. Maybe it's not just his size, because I think he's a decent enough size light heavyweight. Maybe it's also the quality of opposition that they're taking into account, because light heavyweight is just such a minefield right now of beasts. So anyway, just wanted to get my thoughts out there on this rumor that Hearn says Buatsi's ready to fight Anthony Yarde right now. Let me know what you think about it. Would you like to see the fight right now? I made a video a week or so ago where I said I think Buatsi and Yarde should fight sooner rather than later because of the fact the light heavyweight division is so stacked at the top. So have a big domestic rivalry now. Have a big domestic showdown where you can both earn big money from it now get that out the way, and then the winner can go on and challenge for world honors. Yeah, because if you maneuver yourself up to world level without getting a big payday first, you could end up getting destroyed at world level by one of these beasts, and that could damage you. Some fighters get damaged by losses. It depends on the manner of the loss and how competitive the fight was. But if you go up there and get completely obliterated, which could well happen with so many beasts up there, if you go up and get completely obliterated, it can have a damaging effect on you mentally. You know? Whereas it won't be necessarily like an O'Hara Davis versus Josh Taylor, because O'Hara Davis, when he fought Josh Taylor, that was a competitive fight. Yeah, O'Hara Davis was down several times, but he put work in too. Josh Taylor's not going to tell you the fight was easy. It was tough. So, anyway, I'll let you guys deliberate on everything I've talked about in the video. It's Hatman, I'm out.